Released in 1982 in arcades and ported to the ColecoVision in 1983, we have Universal's Mr. Do. And Mr. Do, I remember being a fantastic arcade game. Let's see how the ColecoVision version holds up. Alright, my first impression of Mr. Do for the Coleco was, oh, what did they do to my beloved game? I mean, yeah, it bears a general resemblance, actually a pretty good resemblance to the arcade version, but the ever so slight changes that they did make stand out like a sore thumb, at least to me. And that may be because of the huge amount of experience I have playing the arcade version of the game. But I mean, these slight changes really did make a huge difference. Before I explain these differences, let me talk about gameplay here for a minute, in case you're unfamiliar with Mr. Do and how it's played. In Mr. Do, you control Mr. Do, and he's represented by that white character running around the screen, generally causing mayhem. The arcade version, he was a very colorfully detailed character, but in the ColecoVision version, he's just a white silhouette, basically, of his arcade self. And Mr. Do is armed with a magic ball. That magic ball in the arcade was a fairly decent size and easy to see, but on the ColecoVision version it is like literally 1 pixel. So you're armed with this magic ball, and when you press the fire button, you throw the ball and it bounces all around the place, all about the screen, until it either bounces back to you or hits something. If it hits something, then it takes a little bit of time to regenerate. And each time you use your ball, it takes longer to regenerate. And that adds a lot of challenge to the gameplay, knowing when to use your ball. So the object of Mr. Do is to rack up as many points as you can, and in the process clear each stage. You can clear the stages in several ways. You can clear them by capturing all the cherries, or killing all the monsters, or collecting an extra guy by spelling out extra when the alpha monsters come down from the top of the screen. Or you can clear the stage by finding a diamond, which is a rather rare item in the game. And diamonds can be found inside an apple. So if you drop an apple and crack it open and see a diamond appear, and you manage to capture it before it disappears, it only lasts about 30 seconds on the screen, then you can clear the stage that way. And that diamond concept for clearing the stage may sound a little thrown in at the last minute, but it was actually a really neat concept in the arcade game, because capturing the diamond in the arcade version awarded you with a free credit. And for whatever reason, that concept of winning a free credit in the game by performing a certain task was almost unheard of. There were virtually no games that did that, though it was a standard feature in pinball. So the ColecoVision version does keep the gameplay with the diamond, but there's no reason to award a free credit, because you can play as long as you want, because you don't have to pay a quarter to play. And that's basically how you play Mr. Do. So now that that's out of the way, let me talk about why this game disappointed me ever so. While the graphics for the stage background environments are pretty true to the arcade, the Mr. Do sprite himself and the enemies in the game were pretty disappointing. I wasn't expecting an exact replica by any means, but I thought they could have done a little better. At least got the right color for the monsters. The monsters were red in the game, and I suppose that's because the apples are red in the game, and I could see how they could get lost in your vision. But I don't know, purple just didn't feel right to me. Now those are pretty minor graphical concerns, not that big of a deal really in the scheme of things, but what it boils down to that I had the biggest complaint with was gameplay itself and character control. Now while the regular monsters as purple guys seem to work very similarly to the arcade, they have the same type of AI, and it feels like more or less like the arcade version there. The alpha monsters operate on a whole different dimension from the arcade. Now, if you're to collect one of the bonus food items in the middle of the screen, where all the monsters spawn from, that triggers an alpha monster to drop from the top of the screen, along with his little alpha monster buddies. They kind of look like purple alligators in this version, and they operate so differently than the arcade version that it really changes the entire dynamic of the game. In the arcade, these monsters would burrow, but they would burrow very slowly through the environment. In this version, they burrow very fast as the other monsters do, actually, which makes them extremely powerful. The only benefit that you had in the arcade version against these monsters was that they were slower. And that completely changes how you play the game, because you actually slow up a little bit when you dig, and these guys can outrun you every time. And they just make a beeline for you. And in the arcade version, whenever they came across an apple, they would stop and eat it. And that would actually give you enough time to get away if they were right on your tail, and you could strategically maneuver yourself near apples in order to actually get past the game at a certain point and progress in it. But those functions are thrown out the window in this game. Because they don't really operate under the same constraints. Also, in the arcade, if you killed the main alpha monster, the one with the actual letter on them, the other alpha monsters left on the screen would turn into apples, which you could also use as a type of strategy to defeat your other monsters as you're playing. They just disappear in this version. They don't turn to apples. So it changes the dynamics of gameplay and how you strategize your next move, which is kind of important in a maze-type game. I mean, strategy is everything. And one other minor complaint is that the furthest left and right columns of environment are non-accessible, which I found a bit strange. But everything else in the game is pretty good. The music is spot on, and the sound effects are spot on, and you can't fault them for that. I'm Dommy from Classic Games Revisited. Until next time.